We are now at the last speaker session for today, and the talk is entitled "Maximizing AI Leverage with Reusable Skills and MCP Servers," and the speaker is Danielle Chou. All right, so Danielle is an applied AI solutions architect at Anthropic, where she partners with enterprise life science customers to design and deliver Claude-powered solutions. Before Anthropic, she spent 4 years as a technical solutions architect at Benchling, where she led complex enterprise integrations and contributed to the open source, Allotropy project, which several of you are familiar with. Earlier in her career, she led teams at Zymergen and Proteus Digital Health. She holds a master's in Translational Medicine from UC Berkeley, UCSF. And with that, hope you're caffeinated and ready to go.
All right. Okay. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Oh, now I can't see any of you. Oh, well. Okay. Can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Great. So like you all just heard today, I'm going to be talking about how we can maximize Claude with reusable skills and MCP servers. I'm Danielle. I'm on the Applied AI team here at Anthropic. So we are the technical go-to-market team, helping our customers get on board onto Claude Code. We might help with agent SDK builds, helping write evals, basically anything that's on the more technical side, helping our customers succeed using Claude. And today, I think the main message that I want to communicate to you all is there's a lot of hype in like building custom agents. And of course, there's a time and a place to do so. But there's so much value that you can get out of our Claude enterprise applications that exist already. And the things that you need to invest in are codifying how your team works via skills and connecting to systems your teams use, like MCPs. The agentic surface is already there. We have Claude Code, which was kind of like the first main boom of the agentic surface. We have Cowork, which was literally designed because Claude Code was so successful that we were like, we want to bring this to non-engineers and leverage that same harness. We have Claude and Office agents. So we have Excel, Word just came out, PowerPoint. Is someone speaking? Okay. So I think my goal here is to communicate that like the agentic surfaces are already there. So how can we leverage them and focus more on bringing in your processes and your data? In terms of the demo that I'm going to show today, so we'll start off with converting raw instrument data to ASM. It seems like you guys have been doing this already in the last session. Part of our life sciences plugin that we released last year or earlier this year included a skill that converts raw instrument data to ASM, leveraging the Allotropy library that we talked about. Next, I'm going to show you about how easy it is to build a skill and then use that skill. So we'll take the output of a plate reader ASM and use it to create a triage memo. And then finally, I'll quickly show you all one of our newer agents, the Office agent, for creating a deck that you might share to your leadership. And then finally, within our Cowork surface, which is the one I'm going to focus on today, you can schedule tasks that watch folders on, let's say, your instrument computer and run each step and then drop the deck on your desk Monday morning. All right, so I've been using these terms skills and MCPs. I want to make sure that you all have an understanding of what this means. So think of a skill as just an organized collection of instructions and files, capturing how your team executes on a task in a form that Claude can use. So at the very basic level, a skill is just a markdown file that has a header with a name and a description. And this is all that Claude has available to it in its context before it decides whether or not it should use that skill. If it decides to use that skill, it will then go and look at the rest of the markdown that might have like steps on, oh, how do you run for this example? Like, how do you create a hit triage memo? Here are all the steps that you need to do to create that. And then it might also decide to leverage any like files, nested files within that skill. So say you have a Python script for how to extract hits from your ASM data. Maybe you have a template for the format that you want a memo to exist in that comes out of this skill. The other thing that I use the template one, honestly, pretty commonly. You can put like templates for PowerPoint decks in there too, if you, or PDFs, like whatever format you want to follow. So these can be super valuable if you find yourself like repeatedly running the same prompts or the same string of prompts. Codifying this into a skill and making it shareable with others is incredibly valuable. The other thing that I wanted to highlight where skills can be really valuable is in like extending Claude's knowledge. So I'm sure for the scientists in the room, there are probably times in which you're working with Claude and realizing that maybe Claude isn't yet so great at some like scientific concept that you are deeply familiar with. That can be a case where you create a skill file to kind of enrich Claude with some knowledge around that concept. An example I can give you of this is that I've, in the Claude context of Claude Code, I've helped a lot of customers migrate, like do code modernization or migration, where Claude is pretty decent at R, but maybe struggles a little bit with SAS. We might add in a skill to like give Claude some knowledge around like SAS or maybe even the specific SAS code that the customer has written. We at Anthropic, I'd say the skill that I tell every single customer to build is a branding skill. So that will be something that, of course, Claude could like do some web search, go look for like what your branding might look like, or you can provide it like really real assets of like, here are the colors we use, here are templates we use. We at Anthropic, of course, have a branding skill that we use for I use it for like all of my materials that I make. Those are all examples of areas where skills can be valuable. And while you can go in and manually create your markdown files, your Python scripts, your templates, you can also just use plain English to tell Claude what skill you want to build. So back to the skill that builds this hit triage memo. This is an example of a prompt you might give Claude. Build me a skill that runs the hit triage workflow on my plate reader ASM files. The plate reader files will have % inhibition as the readout, find compounds above 50% inhibition, look each one in PubMed for mechanism and liabilities, write a triage note, etc. So this is all, yes, just plain English for describing the skill that you want to build. Claude will go ahead and write that skill.md file using what should be on by default, but you can always double check the skill creator skill, which will understand the formatting. It will build in like testing and validation. Then Claude also will pick up on the fact that you might be asking to connect to certain systems. So in this prompt, for example, we're asking to look up compounds in PubMed. And so Claude will understand while writing this skill file to connect to PubMed via the PubMed connector. And then it also might decide, or you can explicitly tell Claude that I need to write a small script to parse the ASM. Again, you don't need to be a software engineer. You don't need to understand Python in order to write this small script. You can just ask Claude to do this, or Claude might decide to do it on its own. Claude does love Python. And then finally, in terms of iterating on these skills, you don't need to worry again about going into the actual files. You can iterate with Claude in plain English. I typically spend some time, like, say that I've provided Claude some example input and output when building my skill, but then I go and try a different input file and I don't like the output. I might provide some feedback to Claude on, like, oh, next time you build this memo, like, I want it in a structured table view. Can we update the skill to make it in a structured table view in the future? The other thing that I'll say is, like, you could even just iterate with Claude on whatever it is that you want to update, and then tell Claude, like, can you go figure out, like, how we could update the skill so that it could give me the output that I just built today? So I highly recommend, like, don't worry about, like, one-shotting being able to build a skill. It is totally expected that you're going to do some iteration with Claude. If you provide Claude a ton of context and detail on what you want, then of course maybe you can one-shot it, or, like, there are times where, like, sure, it might happen, but don't think that, like, you win if you one-shot it creating a skill. All right, this is a quick video just to show you, to prove to you that you can actually build a skill with a prompt. So here is the prompt that I created that we just showed. I attached this ASM file that's been parsed. Let me go ahead and play this. And sorry, this is on super speed because I didn't want you all sitting here watching Claude work. But here you can see that it specifically is looking at that plate reader file. It has recognized it needs to call that skill creator skill. It is asking for permission to write files. So Claude doesn't ever, like, write, edit, delete files without asking for your permission. Now it's specifically asking for permission to make queries to PubMed. And then finally, it's actually writing the output files for that triage memo, as well as building the skill. And here you can see at the bottom, it asks if you want to save the skill. I say yes. We can go into our skills and look to see the skill has been created, as well as the Python script that it decided to write. So sorry, that was super fast, but I just wanted to show you all that you can use natural language to write a scale file. Claude will prompt you to save that skill, and then it will be saved within your settings. All right, so the other thing that I want to highlight are how valuable MCPs are. So MCP stands for Model Context Protocol. This is the other half of how you really can make Claude an agent that is super helpful to you. It's an open standard that lets agents connect to external tools, data sources, services through a unified interface. So just think of it like a universal adapter for plugging Claude into your apps. So Anthropic publishes a bunch of connectors in our connector marketplace. These are typically written by the actual, like, vendor of that surface, although some of them we build ourselves. So prior to Anthropic, I worked at Benchling. We have a Benchling connector. We have connectors to public data like PubMed. I find myself using the Google Drive and Gmail connectors constantly. GitHub, I know a lot of people in the life sciences use Office, so Microsoft 365. There are many connectors that exist today. You just need to make sure they are enabled and then authenticate into them. But you can also build your own connectors. So of course, things that might be helpful to you is you want to connect to your own LIMS, your own ELN, maybe your own ASM data lake. These are all connectors where I'd encourage you all to think about, like, does it make sense to build your own? Do you want to work with the vendor of that software and ask them to build something? Do you want to work, like, with like GSI to build these. Those are all different options, but I'd say that being able to connect to your data sources instead of having to like import and export files all the time can be super valuable. Yeah. And then finally, you probably heard this word, or you might have heard this word plugin before. So when we describe a plugin at Anthropic, we are talking about a packaging of primarily skills and MCPs that are distributable inside your organizations. So Anthropic shipped the bioresearch plugin. It has a collection of skills, including the Instrument-to-Allotrope Skill that will take those files from your instruments and identify what assay type they are and then parse them into ASM. The bioresearch plugin also includes other skills like the scientific problem selection, single cell RNA, QC, et cetera, as well as, and sorry, this isn't a comprehensive list, but as well as connectors that are relevant to bioresearch. You could imagine that, like, say your R&D discovery org has a collection of skills and MCPs that are valuable like to your teams or your orgs. You might think about creating a plugin, which Claude can help you with, and packaging those things up and distributing them amongst your specific org. We also see organizations creating plugins for like their entire company. So maybe there are certain plugins relevant to, like when we talked about Anthropic branding, like things at that level, like your company's brand skills, maybe connectors to like your HR systems or email, like things that are relevant to like every single employee at the company. However, like these job specific plugins are, I've seen like super successful and valuable. In particular, we also have a lot of job function specific plugins that are available today. So outside of the bioresearch one, we have ones for legal, we have ones for finance. So I would definitely recommend like looking into those plugins and thinking about like, what would a plugin look like for my organization that would be really valuable for us? Okay. So I wanted to go in and spend some time demoing. I am going to, like I said at the beginning, my goal is to demo instrument file to ASM using a plate reader file and using the existing Instrument-to-Allotrope Skill. We'll then take that ASM and create this triage memo using that hit triage skill that we were talking about. And then finally, we'll go from triage memo to leadership deck. I'm going to have to go and share my other screen. 1 second. Okay. So this is CoWork. It is on the Claude desktop application. I have selected to point to this screening runs folder, and I'm just going to, let's say that like, this is a plate reader file. You're a discovery biology team. You're testing a new cancer cell line, and you want to know biology that drives it. The file is sitting in this screening runs folder. And we want to convert it to ASM. So I'm going to go ahead and say convert the plate reader in this screening runs folder to ASM. And we will let Claude get to work. This might take a second to wake up. So maybe in the meantime, I will show you kind of this customized bar over here. So while there are plugins available, so like the bioresearch plugin that has both the skills, like this instrument data to allotrope skill, as well as connectors. So right now I have the PubMed one and a couple others enabled. These skills that you personally create will be here. So here's the triage hits skill that we just created. You can see it has this skill markdown file as well as this script for extracting hits. You also can see here the skill creator skill. You don't need to worry about what's in here. It's a relatively complex skill, but just know that it exists here to help you. And then let's go back and, oops. Okay, so here we can see that Claude has identified that Allotropy doesn't have a native TCAN Spark parser. It's identified that the file is a TCAN Spark file. It has already recognized that it needs to use this Instrument-to-Allotrope Skill based on the language that I have here. And then what it's going to do, and this might take a second to appear, is it should give me like a list of tasks that it is going to execute on in order to take the plate reader file and convert it to ASM. We'll let this run for a second longer. And then I do have this preloaded because it can take a while to run. But here it is, building the ASM and finally validating the output. And if you want to go in here and like look at the details of what Claude is doing, you can. So right now it's actually validating the ASM that it output. And something failed, so let's try again. All right, I'm going to go over here to my pre-baked demo. So here you can see I asked to convert the plate reader file. Claude went through the same process of recognizing that it needed to parse it. And then here it created both the ASM JSON and then a flattened CSV just to have like a format that you can quickly look at. And then the other thing it will do when prompted is create the actual code for how to parse this file. So maybe you want to take that code and go give it to like your data engineering team to stick in a pipeline, or maybe you just want to use Claude to run these every time ad hoc. I will say that I get a lot of questions around like, how can I think about being like more token efficient when I'm working with Claude? And I think like this step of converting your files to a standard format, you could imagine not doing that and just ad hoc for all your analysis, asking Claude to parse through the data and maybe normalize it in some way. Maybe you're looking at the same assay type across multiple instruments. But doing the step of standardizing your data is going to help you be more token efficient because you are only going to standardize it once, and then you can do a variety of analyses downstream. Okay. So let's see. Okay, so this is completed. It's giving me a little summary of what it did. It recognizes it's a plate reader. We're looking at fluorescence data. It used this flexible parsing. And then here we can see our ASM file. Oh, and syntax highlighting it has been disabled. Okay, so I have this file, say you have a collection of files where you've done all of this parsing, and next I want to run my hit triage. So I'm going to ask Claude, please triage hits from this plate reader run. And as we saw, the triage hits memo skill is already available. We would expect Claude, here we go, to recognize to use that skill. And now it is currently doing what we told it to do when we defined the hit triage skill. So it's extracting hits. It's reading the extract hits Python script, probably deciding if it wants to use it or if it needs to modify it. Oh, it's decided that it needs to regenerate the ASM. We will let Claude do its thing. And while that's running, for the sake of time, I might go show the pre-generated one. Okay, so here we can see that again, I asked to triage hits. 4 hits were confirmed, meaning 4 of these within that plate reader were above that inhibition threshold we set. Claude then knows to query PubMed based on those hits. It's decided to run searches in parallel to move a little faster. It's fetching specific articles, and then it's created this hit triage memo with the relevant targets. Let me scroll down here. So here is the triage memo. So we specifically have this table with the hit summary, with what it's recommending we might pursue, and as well as some target detail for each of these hits. You can imagine, of course, like you might want to query your own internal data sources for research that you've done already. You might have specific things that you want to be in these tables. Those are all things that like you can provide a lot more specificity based on like your systems, your processes. This is just like kind of a general what Claude might do with a triage memo. And then, yeah, this is, so depending on how comfortable you are with having Claude query external data sources, Claude is going to ask you, unless you tell it not to if it can query all any external data source. So even for something public that requires no authentication like PubMed, we know there are still concerns about like exposing data when querying. And so Claude is going to ask you for permission. And here it is generating that memo. The final step that I want to show, we're just going to let this run, is I started doing this and then stopped, is to schedule a task. So I'm going to re-trigger this. So I'm going to ask Claude, schedule a task that runs every Monday, looks at this screening, runs folder for plate reader files, parses the data to ASM, then runs hit triage. And so the reason, one, I'd say like realistically, you're probably not going to be parsing the data to ASM and leaving it on your desktop. That's where you're probably going to push it to some database, some data lake of yours where all of your ASM files live. But for the purposes of this demo, we have them just on our file system. And we've asked Claude to schedule this task to run every Monday, look in your instrument file folder, parse the data, and then run hit triage. I love scheduled tasks. I use them for all sorts of work of mine. I use scheduled tasks for like going in and reading my email. I use them for like sending me Slack updates on like new features that have been released at Anthropic. They can be super valuable for a lot of course, the scheduled work that you want to do. So here you can see that Claude triggered this skill called schedule. It helped me run this scheduled task. If I go here and look at my scheduled tasks, I can actually see that Claude created the task. It's scheduled to run at 9 a.m. next Monday. It's going to go through the process that we just described. And you can also just click run now, and this can run whenever you want. You don't have to wait for the task to be scheduled. And you also can change the frequency here. But honestly, I rarely go into here. I just talk to Claude and ask it to change the frequency of my task. All right. And then finally, let me share different screen. Sorry, I know we're running a little over. I want to share the last step. Okay. So finally, I just want to, I'm not going to do this one live because it'll take a couple minutes. But say you have that triage memo and you want to build a hit triage deck from the memo. Your audience's medchem leadership, you want 1 slide per hit, an executive summary, comparative liability matrix, recommendations. And here I specifically ask Claude to use our brand template. Again, that will trigger the skill that specifically specifies like what our PowerPoint decks look like at Anthropic. And with this prompt, it's going to create this pretty beautiful PowerPoint. I did have to, I think I had like maybe 2 prompts after this where I told it to remove some weird line that was there. Can you get rid of the orange line? But this literally, I think, yeah, these are 2 additional prompts that I didn't like something it had done. But other than that, this deck was created using this Claude PowerPoint agent. It took that triage memo and created these slides. You could, again, think about turning this into a skill on its own of like hit triage deck builder skill, whatever, or you could just provide Claude a prompt. So this is what the slide deck looks like. I would say we do have, like, you can build decks in Claude itself, like Claude Coworker, but I will say that I think I've had more success building them using the Office agent in PowerPoint. I think it's a little, they tend to look a little bit better, but you can iterate more easily on them here, of course. But you can also build these within surfaces like Cowork as well. Okay, so I think I had just one last slide. Go back here. Sorry for all the moving around. All right, so the 2 things that like I really hope that you take from this talk are like, yes, there is a time and a place to build like custom agents from scratch. But Claude has a lot of surfaces that are agentic surfaces themselves. And I highly recommend thinking about spending time investing in one. If you have a workflow, a data analysis that you run every day, every week, pick one and write it as a skill this week. So work with Claude to build a skill. And then 2, if your workflow depends on like a system or a data source, you find yourself constantly like exporting data from your LIMS system, ask your vendors about shipping an MCP or partner with your IT teams to build one. We have some great skill jar courses on building MCPs, as well as an actual MCP creator skill. All right, that is all I had today. I am happy to take some questions.